Hey, I'm Alicia, and this is Mobility Mastery, and I'm super excited about this video that we're about to dive into today. As you can see here, your fascia is a reflection of you, and this has been one of the most interesting topics to me since I really started looking at it like this probably in 2011. I've been doing fascia release work with people through my method of kinetics, which is a form of stepping on people to release fascia, since 2008, but I didn't really dive into a lot of the more, I'm gonna call it interesting aspects of fascia probably till 2011. But this is something that I got to see firsthand working with so many different types of people. So most people came to me because they were in pain, but a lot of my clients over the years stayed with me week after week or every couple of weeks or once a month, whatever their body needed to maintain their results. So we weren't managing pain, we were, preventing pain, keeping them optimized. And I got to see over the years what would happen to these clients who were consistently coming to me if they had a really stressful holiday season, for example, or maybe they had a life event. Maybe they were, unhappy when they first started with me and ended up doing some personal work or got in a relationship that made them happy. I mean, there's so many things that can affect our fascia, and I literally got to feel it under my feet change week by week, depending on what was happening in their lives. So, what I'm about to share with you is based on interacting with my clients and actually consciously starting to notice these things, talk to them about it, and really dig in and see if I could understand what was happening, maybe somewhat metaphorically, but also scientifically. So I am a researcher. I love to research fascia and understand what's happening in my private practice or in my own body from that scientific level. And so I'm excited to talk to you about these 6 reciprocal roles because there are a lot of things that can affect your fascia. So these are maybe the 6 that I feel are the most consistent that I see across the board, right? No matter who you are or what type of life you live. And the reason I called it reciprocal is because what you do, and we're going to talk about it, affects your fascia. But in turn, how that fascia has been affected by you and your life can reciprocally impact you. So it's kind of like a cyclical thing. Whatever you do that impacts your fascia creates something in your fascial or your nervous system that then in turn affects you back. So it's a reciprocal role here. So just keep that in mind as we move through them. So number 1 is your daily habits. So whatever we do the most consistently molds our fascia into that shape. So I would include under daily habits how you sit, how you stand, how you sleep, whether you're at a desk for work or not, if you're an athlete, if every day you go to yoga, if every day, maybe you're changing it up every day, like whether it's consistently the same or consistently different, whatever you do on a daily basis is going to directly affect your fascia. So fascia takes on the shape that we most consistently put our body in. So that sitting is, the classic example, because if you're sitting all the time, then your quad hip flexors are usually going to get really tight. Your low hamstrings by the, on the back of the knee are going to get tight because your knee is bent, etc. But it can also be, the thoughts you think on a daily basis, your habitual thoughts, your habitual emotions that you feel. So, this is unique to all of us. So if you feel like sharing under the video, you could describe each of these, in your life and how you think it's affecting your fascia or what your fascia is reflecting back to you about you and how you're living your life. Okay, number 2. Movement and inactivity. So both of these things can actually affect fascia, positively or negatively. I would always err on the side of movement is better than not moving. However, when you move, you definitely wind up your fascia. You're using it, right? And like anything that you use, you should be taking care of it so that it can work for you when you ask it to, move. So most of us, would never expect to buy a brand new car and never take care of it and expect it to reach 300,000 miles, no problem. We know that we need to get the oil changed, we know that we need to, have the brakes looked at eventually, blah, blah, blah. But for some reason we expect our bodies to move, right? Especially if you're an athlete, or even just, whether that athlete in you is professional or just for fun, you can't use your body and not take care of it. So your movement is definitely going to affect your fascia. It's going to wind it up potentially, but it's also going to keep it healthy. So you need movement to have healthy fascia, but at the same time, if you're moving a lot, you need to take care of your fascia so it can move well for you. And then inactivity definitely affects fascia. If you're inactive a lot and you're not moving very much, that can make your fascia unhealthy. It can get actually like brittle, achy, dehydrated from inactivity as well. And then of course, if you're inactive and you're sitting or lying down a lot, it's going to mold into that shape that you're taking, like we talked about with daily habits. So these two things will definitely be reflected in your fascia. So I can always tell, if someone's been active or inactive. It's partly muscle tone, but it's partly the tone of the fascia, that takes on a certain shape and texture, whether you're moving a lot or super inactive. All right, number 3. And this is a biggie. And then I'm going to put your nervous system, and then this stands for fight, flight, freeze. So if you are constantly in a stress response, constantly in a state of nervous system, like stress, and in any of these fight, flight, or freeze responses on a continual basis, feeling unsafe in the world, in survival mode, any of those, I know what that's like. It's definitely going to affect your fascia. And this is a theory of mine. It's a working theory based on working with so many people, like I said, since 2008. But I've kind of come to see that I believe what's happening in our nervous system gives your fascia its texture. Whereas your movement and your daily habits and the shapes you take most consistently give your fascia its shape. So the shape it's in is kind of like your movement, your activities, your daily habits, but its texture has a lot to do with your nervous system. Not the only thing, but a lot to do with it. And then of course it's also going to be how hydrated your fascia is and all that. But the number one thing that will affect fascia negatively is stress, of course, chronic stress. I'm not talking about like an acute stress that comes and goes real fast, but chronic long-term stress or nervous system fight, flight, freeze response will definitely impact your fascia, because there's a huge reciprocal relationship between your fascia and your nervous system, since fascia wraps every nerve ending, and it's also the superhighway of communication for nerve signals to travel between your body and your brain. So whatever's happening in your nervous system gets reflected to you by your fascia. Okay, moving on. Number 4. Emotion and memory. So I've had a front row seat to a lot of people stepping into my office and having emotional releases or certain memories coming up when I step on them, and even some really weird things like people smelling something when we release fascia, or maybe like tasting something weird and then they have a memory from a long time ago. So some interesting things happen when you're releasing fascia, but I've kind of come to see that fascia is like our record keeper. And if you don't kind of process and really move out of your system those records, then they stay there. And it's imprinted on that fascial system. So one of the ways I've talked about it before is like if your nervous system, right, which is kind of how the sensation that accompanies all the emotions you have runs through the body. It's via the nervous system. So when the nervous system is activated and you're feeling anything, be it good or bad, right, healthy, unhealthy, positive, negative, however you want to look at it, it gets kind of imprinted on the fascia as if your nervous system is the pen and your fascia is the paper. And we can totally change it, right? So you can go in and like erase chapters that you don't like. It doesn't mean you don't remember them, but they're not stuck in your body anymore. So your fascia can definitely reflect your past emotions that maybe you haven't moved out of your body, as well as certain memories that are maybe stuck in there on a habitual loop that have gotten ingrained physically, fascially speaking. And we could talk a lot about that, but again, this is meant to be like an introduction to these reciprocal roles, and if you ever want to join a course of mine or dive deeper with me, we go way deeper into all of these. So I just want to touch on them and introduce you to these concepts today. All right, number 5 is kind of a cool one. Okay, making sense of your world, and I was debating whether to put your or the, so it's probably both. And the reason I say that is, so making sense of the world or making sense of your world, they're kind of two different things, right? Your world is kind of like who you are, your thoughts, your emotions, your memories, like we just talked about, your habits, your past traumas, your past loves and feeling connected, whatever makes you you. And then of course there's the world, and both of you are interacting all the time, right? You and your body are interacting with the world, and the world is interacting with you. And there are 3 processes in your body that have a lot to do with your fascia. There's proprioception, interoception, and exteroception are the 3 I kind of want to highlight here. There's nociception too, and nociception is your sense of danger, and nociception is definitely going to give you a pain signal. But the 3 that I want to talk about really are proprioception, interoception, and exteroception in terms of making sense of the world or your world. So proprioception is your brain's ability to detect your body in physical space and then conduct movement in whatever space you're in. And so your body's constantly assessing where you are, what you're doing, and then, you know, like right now, my hands are moving. That's because of proprioception. My ability to talk right now has a lot to do with proprioception. And you have 10 times as many proprioceptors in your fascia than you do muscle fiber. So your movement potential and your ability to detect yourself in physical space has a lot to do with healthy fascia. But interoception is also interesting. And interoception is your sense of yourself. So your sense of what's going on, everything going on inside your body. And so it could be as simple and scientific as hunger pangs or warmth, or whether you're cold or not. You know, your senses, right? What you're sensing is going on inside. But it also could certainly be, I think, how at home you feel in your body, how at home you feel in the world, how safe you feel, because your nervous system is interacting with, you know, those like proprioceptors, right? It's a nerve communication signal. Proprioceptor is the nerve. Proprioception is the process, but it's definitely a nervous system process. And so super related, right? If you're in fight, flight, or freeze, if it's maybe an internal experience, like you're battling yourself or you feel not at home in your body, which can happen a lot when you're in pain, then you're going to enact a potential cascade of nerve communications that it's not okay or not safe to even be in your body. But on the flip side, right, you could cultivate a sense of belonging in your own skin, a sense of belonging to yourself, feeling at home in your body, and that could create a different cascade of messengers and processes that would probably feel pretty good. And again, we could be here forever talking about each one of these, but we're just going to touch on them today. And then that last one is exteroception, or your body and brain's ability to detect the outer world, the external world, and make sense of it. Whether that, again, it could be external cold, like is it hot outside or is it, cold outside? But also, am I in danger or am I safe? So all of that is happening, all that communication is happening all the time. Where I think things get super interesting to think about is how those three things, or maybe if you want to add nociception in there, proprioception, interoception, exteroception, maybe nociception, how those are interacting all the time, because it's not like they interact independent of one another. Those 3 or 4 processes are happening simultaneously 24/7 and impacting one another. So your ability to move, or proprioception, might be dependent on interoception or exteroception, right? And those might be dependent on how safe you feel or how unsafe you feel. And so really just interesting to think about, I think. Okay, and then moving on, we've got the last one here. Environment and epigenetics. So that's obviously a big one as well. But if you think about all of these prior things, how the environment in which you grew up is going to have a huge impact on your nervous system for sure, and your nervous system patterns, and as well as making sense of the world and your world. And that is going to definitely impact you as you grow up, because what your brain and body is always trying to do is automate as much of your behavior as it can, so that you're not exhausted every day relearning how to get out of bed, how to brush your teeth, how to put clothes on, right? Like we take these things for granted, but your brain and body learn how to do that, so you don't have to think about it every day. But what that means is sometimes you're enacting as an adult maybe unhealthy behaviors from childhood that are no longer serving you. And so it could be anything from toxicity, which is not a behavior, right? But maybe you grew up in a toxic household with a lot of chemicals, but maybe you grew up in an emotionally toxic household that affected your, sense of the world or your sense of self. Maybe it affected your memory and emotion or your nervous system, right? And all of that in turn affected how much you wanted to move or not move and your daily habits. So as you can see, all of these 6 processes affect one another. And as I mentioned in the beginning, you can determine all of these things. Like, I could not look at a health history or an intake form from a client and not, like, basically have them say nothing to me during a session. And I'd be able to guess a lot of these things about them. How much they move or don't move, whether they're in fight, flight, or freeze consistently. Maybe not so much the memory and emotion, but they might have a spontaneous emotional release that they can't hide, I don't know. But I could also tell a lot about how they've made sense of the world and maybe made sense of themselves. Like, all of this is actually palpable and visible if you're paying attention to the clues that are not verbal or maybe not conscious. They're there, they're living in your fascial system and living in your nervous system. And so this is why I say your fascia is a reflection of you. So, everything from the thoughts you think, to your activities, to your history, your childhood, all of it. Isn't this cool? I honestly, I've been doing this so long and I'm still super excited, like a nerdy little kid. Proud of it. So raise your hand with me if you think this is super cool. Really fun to talk about and explore with yourself or other people. Comment below for sure. Let me know I'm not alone, for one thing, but secondly, if you're willing to share which one of these popped out at you the most, maybe as affecting your fascia and then in turn you and your quality of life the most, if you had to pick just one. And of course, if you want to add some, you could do that, but pick one for sure. Share your thoughts on that one thing below and how it's impacted your health, your injuries, your sense of self, all of it, right? Your movement. Share that below, and I can't wait to read them because I just find this So interesting. And of course, if you're brand new here, welcome, and make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you want to join my email community, I send newsletters and email trainings that I don't do anywhere else to my email community every single week. And you can join by clicking the link below in the description below this video, and you'll also get some cool free resources, a kinetics technique, and some other resources for you. And I want to help you make use of all this information with all of my resources, and I want to show you how to do that. So click that link, join my community. I'm so glad you're here. Share your thoughts below, and I'll see you next time.